right, today I want to welcome Bruce Weinstein. He is the plan man. He is a problem solver focusing on the insurance and wealth building space. He brings 35 plus years of experience to any platform and is ready to bring a plan to your podcast. Well, he's bringing a plan to leaders and legacies today. Bruce, welcome.
Thanks, Craig. Happy to be here. Good yuntif.
Thank you.
That's an inside joke, everybody.
So anyway, you live down in Florida. You're from New York, and you help people put together financial plans. And give us like just quick snippet who you help and how you help them.
Sure. So I started at Merrill Lynch in 1986. And back then, a stockbroker was a stockbroker. They weren't financial planners. And the evolution of the space started to morph into the 90s and to the 2000s of financial planners. You've heard about certified financial planners, and they were kind of off to the side. And eventually, I think the brokerage industry realized that there's a better way to skin the cat. And so my career evolved from just being a stock jockey, selling stocks and bonds and mutual funds, to being more advisory and planning oriented and addressing the insurance risk side as well as the investment side. And then the whole key with the planner, as you're saying, why the plan man and what the plan man's about is, it's the Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. And so everybody has a journey. Everybody has goals and objectives. And so if you don't start putting that down and mapping it out, well, how do you know you're going to get there? How do you know you're going to get there on time? How do you know you're going to have enough money when you get there? Because whether you like it or not, you're going to get there, right? If you live healthy enough, you're going to get to a point in time where, okay, here I am. And so what if you get there and you don't have enough money?
Yeah.
And then, of course, in the journey, again, I'm paraphrasing this, short circuiting it, but, throughout the journey, there's roadblocks, there's obstacles, there's potholes. And so if you got disabled, if your spouse passed away, if you passed away, so the risk management on the insurance side of things, if I'm disabled, how am I supposed to pay my bills now? How am I supposed to feed myself? If I lose my spouse, how do I keep paying the mortgage and put the kids through college? So, the risk management of the insurance side, as well as the investments. The investments aren't any good if you didn't have health insurance and all of a sudden you got $1 million bill you can't pay because you decided not to get health insurance. So, all these pieces go together. It's a big puzzle, Craig. And so my job is to help put that puzzle together and show people where their blind spots are, and give them this is where you're heading conversation.
Well, and you mentioned the $1 million insurance bill. I imagine there's people listening that think that's just, I'll never have that. Well, I was in the hospital 2 years ago.
Yeah.
For 3 months, and my medical bills clocked in just below 2 million.
Yeah. I teed it up. I didn't know if you wanted to share that. And if you had, but keenly aware of what you went through, I figured you'd throw it back. But yeah, $2 million, and you probably walked away with relatively minimal exposure with your health insurance, assuming you had health insurance, and you just pretty much paid your maximum out of pocket for those years, and that was it. And the majority of the bill, true, got covered, or no, you didn't have insurance?
Yeah, the majority. No, I had.
Be better if you didn't. We could really have a bad story to tell people. You had insurance, I hope.
Yeah, no, I actually had, a legacy plan, a pre-Obamacare plan. Really, really good plan. Used to cost me $100 a month. That went up. Whew. And
best money ever spent, though.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's an interesting reality. In my lifetime, I will never spend more on insurance premiums than I've already received in benefits.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a bell. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And
you're ahead of the game.
Well, that's one way of looking at it.
Well, you're here, you're still here. So thank God for that. Right. But the point simply was, it's not going to happen to me. Right. You didn't expect it going in. People don't realize that their levels of apathy and omnipotence things can happen to anybody. I came up with this word at one of my networking groups. You know the word accident. I came up with the word intendant. So instead of an accident, something, right? I didn't plan on that. It was an accident. Well, how about an intendant? I didn't intend to get sick. I didn't intend to die. I didn't intend to have that accident, like intendant. So I got to trademark it. But like, I didn't get in my car today and go to the gym intending to have an accident. I didn't intend to pull the tendon in my bicep lifting a weight that now needs surgery, right? So, stuff happens. And so insurance is risk management. And so what I like to make sure people understand is you're paying a third party to assume a financial obligation because you don't have the money and you don't want to pay for that exposure. So you eliminate the exposure by buying insurance, whether it's health insurance, motorcycle insurance, disability, life, whatever it is. Like every insurance is basically saying, hey, Craig, you cover me if something happens.
Yeah.
And then what's going on right now, I'll kind of pivot into the South Florida market and other markets, California. Hurricanes are destroying the viability of insurance companies down here. 7 carriers have left the market. Our homeowners insurance has literally doubled. 7 carriers left. So there's a vacuum now because, folks, what I want you to understand, the reason I'm going down this path is there's a reason your rates have gone up. And it's a couple of different factors. 1, competition left. 2, the existing carriers remaining don't necessarily have enough bandwidth that they want to take on more risk. And they're being basically told, hey, you got to pick up another 100,000 houses. Well, we don't want the risk of another $100,000 houses. Our balance sheet can't support it. So we need to raise capital because insurance is a pool of everybody else's money that's managed by the insurance companies, hoping to make a little return. If you got $1 billion of premiums, you can cover $1 billion of risk. They want to invest the $1 billion, make 7, 8, 10%. And then if they have to give the $1 billion back, they keep the spread. That's how they make their money. It's just playing with the bigger pool of money. And they invest it modestly. Okay. So when the hurricane comes through and now they have $2 billion of losses and there's $1 billion in the pot, what happens? Well, they can't pay everybody. Right. And so then the FEMA gets involved, federal emergency. Right. And, so it's just this whole thing. So now here's a hurricane that just came through here a couple of months ago. We had a hurricane last year. Rates took off. Was there enough money in the pot for this year's hurricane? What happens if a hurricane hits again in 3 weeks? Yeah. Who's filling in that? And, Florida is so big, it's, 6, 8 hours from top to bottom to drive it. So hurricane can hit the Keys. Then it could come over to Tampa Bay. It could come over to Jacksonville. It could hit, me in the, where do I live? Delray, Palm Beach County, right? Just, Miami. So the hurricane can hit Naples on the way. So the storms can hit different pockets of Florida. It's just not the same community. And that's been the problem. They move around. They hit the islands in the Caribbean. They just wipe these islands out. So, people have to understand what's driving the costs and the risks that are involved. So I'm going bigger picture with homeowners because everybody pretty much has to have it at some point, right?
Well, let's talk a little bit about Medicare, because right now, as we're speaking, my wife is at the hospital with a friend who's on Medicare.
All right.
And he had just retired. He was walking around, living life, and he fell and broke both of his hips and his shoulder.
Wow.
Guy's looking at 6 months of recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And Medicare would cover like 23 days in the hospital. Then he had supplemental that would cover like another 10. I may be getting the dates wrong, but
no, you're in alignment there. Go ahead.
And where it came out was, okay, well, there's another 5 months of recovery this guy needs.
So that's long-term care. That's totally different and not what's covered by Medicare. Medicare is going to cover hospitalization, doctor treatments, procedures. Okay. And then prescription drugs, has coverage there as well. So not to go down the rabbit hole, but there's different types of Medicare plans with different levels of coverages. But Medicare as a whole is not going to take care of 6 months of rehab for a stroke victim, or in this guy's case, broken hips. He's got to go to rehab. He's got to be in a nursing home or assisted living for a while till he's back on his feet. I mean, both hips, it's, you're going to be wheelchair bound or whatever. But the policy, the Medicare sup plan is going to basically stop covering him in 100 days or less.
Yeah.
So, and it's not 100% coverage. It basically it's 20 days, and then it goes to a copay where you pay some, they pay some, up to 100 days, and then after 100 days, that's it. Well, that's 3 months, but that's why we do long-term care counseling with clients. Of okay, and that's only because this guy had an accident. What if this was permanent?
Well, and that's the thing where this really scared me, because I'm looking back at my own situation. And for those that don't know, it's I talk about it for always, so it's hard to imagine this. But 2 years ago, I went in the hospital with COVID, and that turned into a 3-month stay. And when I left the hospital, I was in a wheelchair for another 3 months. I mean, I could get up and walk short distances, but it was 3 months. Well, before I could go into the grocery store without the wheelchair, was probably at least 4 months. And I had health insurance which covered all that, and you had the sort of the usual dance where when I left the hospital in Austin, I had to go down to San Antonio because they couldn't find a LTAC a longer term acute care hospital in Austin that would take my insurance. We still had that dance, but at least from my perspective, I was like, my 3 months in the hospital, except for the first 5,000, was covered by insurance.
Mm-hmm.
That was a couple $1,000,000. I paid 5,000.
Right.
But then I see this with this friend, and it's terrifying because I'm like, holy cow! I thought when you get to 65, all that crappy Medicare tax that you've been paying over the years would cover all this stuff, and it sounds like it doesn't.
Oh, again, there's the drop-off point where the bridge ends, and now you need something else. And so that's where people don't understand that Medicare is not going to cover nursing homes and long-term rehabilitation facilities. So yeah, that's why you counsel people of, hey, this is why we talk about long-term care insurance. Again, he had an accident, he fell. It's not, hopefully, again, I don't know the guy's financial situation, but he's going to have 3 months of participated coverage, and then it's going to stop. I don't know that this year's particular numbers, but they might cover up to like make him pay $200 a day, and they'll pay everything above the $200 a day, whatever. We can Google it and find out the exact number. But so he's got co-insurance. He's going to be patient responsible for a certain amount of money for so many days. But at day 101, that coverage stops. They don't pick up anything at that point. And then if you had a long-term care policy, then that would kick in. But I want to go back to what you said when you had this 2 years of rehabilitation and, struggling in the wheelchair. So your medical bills got paid, but let's tie in another type of insurance, and that's disability. What'd you do for income? You're in a hospital. You're in a coma. Did you have a job? Did you work? Were you self-employed? Do you have passive income? And I'm not saying you specifically. I'm not trying to get into your affairs, but, to the listener out there in your audience, this guy had a 2-year ordeal of physical health challenges, comas, and the like. He's not drawing a paycheck. If he's working for IBM, IBM's putting him on medical leave. He's got to get maybe disability. He's going to if he's making $100,000, $200,000 a year, nobody's paying him $200,000 a year while he's sitting in the hospital. That's gone. You got short term, you maybe get a month, 3 months, no more than 6 months, and then you're kicked onto long-term disability by the Fed. That's like a Social Security check. Yeah. So that's why we talk about disability income insurance. Because if you're self-employed and you can't work, if I'm a surgeon, if I'm a dentist, I can't use my hand anymore. How am I making my living? Dentist makes $500,000, $1 million a year, and now he can't see his patients because his left hand doesn't work anymore. What's he going to do? So you're self-employed, dentists, doctors, surgeons, especially, they're going to cover those hands. They're going to, you got the shakes all of a sudden because you got early onset of Parkinson's. You got to retire at 50. You better have disability insurance. So again, you see where I'm going is there's so many different components of insurance that people are just not necessarily in tune to or realizing, oh, gee, what happens if that happens to me? And that's what we're trying to make sure you said, the planning is, well, what if? And then, of course, it's a budgetary concern of like, well, how do I pay for all that?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, in terms of the disability, the first couple weeks after I woke up from the coma, I can tell you I wasn't thinking right. And even after that, it took some time
Sure.
to get better. And when I left the hospital, all the way up until the day I left the hospital, I had the shakes severely. And I was like, I type a lot, as part of my job. And I thought, well, at least there I can do voice dictation. Now, turns out it was some drug they had me on. And when I left the hospital, that drug went away, the shakes went away. But what if my brain didn't come back online? And that was a serious question. I mean,
Sure.
the doctors were telling my wife, he may not be right in the head. You may not get the same man back that you dropped off at the hospital.
Yeah. Pretty scary.
Yeah. And, and I make money based on what I think and my ability to, mentally process things. Thank God I wasn't a tradesman. There's no way I could have returned to work. And as it was when I did return to work, I came back to work. So I got out of the hospital November 6th, 2021. January 3rd, 2022, I went back to work, and my work day looked like this. I get up, eat breakfast, take a nap, work for a couple hours, take a nap, work a couple more hours, take another nap. And, and I have to admit, I think I took a nap today, but that's more rare. It was a shorter nap. But
You're making people jealous.
Well, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
who wouldn't like to wake up, have breakfast, and go take a nap? I love that. That's my Sundays.
I tell you what, I'll trade my nap for their body.
Absolutely. No, I'm teasing.
Yeah. But yeah. No, so I know for me, this, what you did has become very real to me in the last 2 years. First, through my own experience. And then second, through watching this friend who, he made it across the finish line. He made it to retirement. And like, literally within 3 months, 6 months of retiring, he has an accident, falls down, needs 6 months of rehab. And all of a sudden I start discovering
it's going to cost them.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. the rehab facility, like going to see a physical therapist, something like that, probably would be covered. But if he's in a facility, he can't go home anymore. He's got to be on property somewhere, or he needs round the clock treatment at home or care at home because he can't bathe and go to the toilet and, cook for himself because of that. Well, these are the different terminologies that you hear about as home health care and assisted living. And, so he's not chronic. He's not a dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's person that's going to need it for the rest of his life. But at the same time, Medicare is not covering that window once it's past that 100 days. Now, he keeps going to see his doctor. He needs another procedure. They got to go in and fix the hip. That's going to be covered under his Medicare. That's medical treatment. But being in a home of some kind, an institution, our friend's mother's in a memory care unit. Her memory's, slipping. She can't be on her own. She wakes up screaming in the middle of the night. She doesn't know where she is. And, she's in a group home type setting. So it's not as institutional feeling, but that's not covered by Medicare. Now, if she got no money and goes to Medicaid, another, donut hole we could go down. But, the two daughters are paying the mother's care. Like, her Social Security check goes towards that, and they make up the difference.
Yeah.
And that's a family decision. Now, why didn't they ever buy long-term care 20 years ago? Nobody talked to them about it. Or if she had it, it ran out. Who knows? But I don't think they have it. But, this is an 89-year-old woman. So she would have had to have been counseled close to 30 years ago. So that's what, 1993. I started doing long-term care counseling in 94, 95. So it was definitely being talked about.
Yeah.
And those programs have changed, just to put a cherry on top here, and have gotten very expensive. So for somebody who's 70 now thinking about it, it's going to be really expensive. You got to be addressing this in your 50s, and it's still expensive because the costs have just exploded.
Yeah.
It's $200,000-$300,000 a year sometimes for these places. So it's no joke how expensive they got.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, kind of going back to my scenario, when I woke up, I was out for 6 weeks, and when I woke up, brain was fogged for another 2 weeks, and then my wife started filling me in on what had been going on in the world, and I learned that my team had stepped up and ran the business without me, and freelancers kind of came in and reached out to my team and said, "Hey, we'll do whatever it takes, whatever's needed, as long as Craig's in the hospital." And so that's kind of the inspiration for this podcast, is Leaders and Legacies. It was my realization that I'd made an impact beyond myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you're counseling people, let's take a couple minutes and talk about leadership. What does leadership look like in the area of financial planning?
Ooh, well, I'm the shepherd. I'm the leader. Like, a lot of people don't know what to do. They don't know what to ask. They have a general sense of things. Unfortunately, a lot of them get a lot of disinformation or bad information. Oh, I heard from, oh, so-and-so told me, I thought it was. And they're more times than not way off target, way off base. Like, that's not how that works. Oh, it doesn't. But, I think I'm just started I just finished my 37th year. So now I'm clocking in the 38th year. So I started 86. And I think for me, the conviction is I know my game. I come across with confidence and conviction. I'm a strong educator. I really lay it out so people can understand what it's all about. Why don't people do things, Craig? Is they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to ask questions because they might look foolish or stupid. And so they kind of sit back and do nothing because they don't want to raise their hand. They don't want to ask a silly question. And at the end of the day, they won't tell me, or somebody, no, they'll tell me because I push, but they won't say, like, I don't get it. I don't understand that. I'm not doing it because. So I try and make sure that I'm strong with the education of, let me tell you how this works. I put them at ease of, there's no bad questions. And I really drive in, like, are you getting this before we make a decision? And so the reason I get people to, quote unquote, sign on the dotted line is they understand it. And now they're comfortable making the decision and they don't feel like they're making a mistake. And so all too often people don't move forward in fear of making that mistake. And so you go back to leadership in your question. Well, I'm leading from confidence. I'm leading from conviction. I'm leading in demonstration so that when they're sitting in front of me and we've spent hours, and trust me, I say this, depending on what we're doing, it's months of counseling, it's weeks of counseling, it's hours and hours of counseling. It's really getting into, if we're doing a comprehensive financial plan for somebody, it's not done overnight. Okay, you need health insurance. I mean, that's an hour conversation. But if we're really getting into the full-blown financial plan, what are we doing for the next 50 years of your life type of thing, that's weeks and months on end of conversation, because there's homework that has to be done, there's information that's got to be gathered, there's things you and your spouse need to really think about and dig into, and budgets and a million things. So at the end of the day, during all of that process, I'm demonstrating my competency. I'm demonstrating that leadership that you're talking to. And so when it's time to start moving and implementing, well, the decisions are already there because we've been building and building and building the trust and the guidance that it's like, well, now you see why we're doing this. Because it's all about you. I'm listening, right? 2 ears, one mouth. As talkative as I am, I listen. And I say, am I correct in what you're saying? Is this really what you wanted? What about this? Have you thought about it this way? Did you ever think you could do this? And so I'm a mudslinger in the sense of, let's throw mud on the wall and see what sticks. And so the planning, look, the I say this time and time again. All a financial plan does is show you the direction and the end of where you're heading right now with all the facts we know today. If you don't like where that ending spot is, now's the day you could start to fix it. You can't go back 6 years ago. You can't say, oh, I wish I bought Microsoft and Apple in 1985. Like you can only deal with, today's September 25th, right? So from September 25th, moving forward, I can make changes and influence that change today. I can't cry about what happened. I can only fix from today. And so if you don't have a plan, the plan is your GPS. The plan is your Garmin. The plan is that Waze. You plug in, I need to get from, you just said you went from Maryland, back to Texas. How many hour drive is that? You have rain, you have flooding, you have detours, you have potholes, football games and traffic. So, the Garmin's rerouting you constantly. Well, that's your financial plan, isn't it? Your financial plan has to constantly be rerouted. Market just dropped 10%. Market just went up 10%. Reroute. Yeah. Another year went by. Can I still retire at the age that I had designated? I want to retire at 62. Market dropped 30%. Reroute.
And what would you say about the, for your clients that need to take action? What would leadership look like for them?
How do you mean? I'm not sure I understand that.
Well, so it kind of coming back to the whole thing of making an impact beyond yourself. And if I look at my own situation, there's I'm kind of thankful that I lived because there were a few things where a few things I didn't have in order,
right,
for my wife to pick up and go on with her life. And I mean, I'm 56 years old. I didn't plan to die. This was 2 years ago. I didn't plan to die at age 54.
Right.
That's almost what happened.
Yeah.
And so, treat me as your client, saying, Craig, you talk about leaders and legacies. Here's, from a financial standpoint, here's where you should be taking more of a leadership role in your family.
Well, so I think if I'm understanding it, is one, I'm just your co-pilot. I'm your navigator. This is your football team. I'm the coordinator, right? So throwing those different analogies out. So it's your plane. I'm the navigator. You're still the pilot. You're on the ship. I'm the navigator. You're still the pilot. So, you get to make those final decisions, but what does the navigator do? The navigator is charting out a safe journey, right? It's delivering for you to avoid the storm, the pitfalls, the things that are going to be damaging or delaying your trip. Now it's up to you as the commander of the ship, right? The owner of the ship and the football team, is you got to make the call. You got to send in that play. You got to decide this is what you're going to do. So all I can do is empower you as the client to make that decision. And then as a couple, if it's a couple, give them the forum to deliberate and ask the questions. And I can't tell you all the years, Craig, how many times the two spouses were not on the same page. Mm-hmm. Their wants were different, their desires and needs. And it was like, whoa, let me get my psychologist hat on and play therapist now, because now you're like, she's saying this and he's saying that, and I don't want to go to Florida. Well, that's where I said I was going to go. The kids are going to be there. If my mother's down there, and I don't want to be about your mother, and they're fighting.
Yeah,
because it's about money, right? So now so I play referee. You do a lot of things in there. So the managing the money. What I'm basically doing is managing expectations. Probably the biggest thing that I do is setting and managing expectations. Because you know what? You and I have zero control of what's going to happen to the stock market. Zero.
Right.
So if your money, your investments, your retirement is geared towards a stock market portfolio strategy, versus real estate or whatever else, but whatever you're putting your money into, you don't really have, you have history, but as the disclaimer says, past performance, no indication of future performance. So just because it made 10% doesn't mean it's going to keep making 10%, right? So that's a CYA for the industry. So, all I can do is manage expectations, tell them, look, all things end badly, otherwise they're not going to end. At some point, the market's going to have another correction, because we've already had 5 in my career, and I'm sure 6 and 7 are going to be out there if I live long enough. And so, there's no date circled on the calendar that says, hey, Craig, let's crash the market today at 2 p.m. And everybody can prepare for it. It doesn't happen. So
Well, and 2 years ago,
yeah.
and 2 years ago for me, 54 years old, in good health, no expectation of pending death. And that all flipped. That all flipped in 23 days. 23 days. I went from swimming in Lake Austin with my grandkids, hiking up, and I live in the hill country. We have hills here. It's not Colorado, but it's a strenuous workout. Hiking the hills in my backyard, got down to the lake and swimming with my grandkids. And 23 days later, they told my wife that I was going to die. That's not planned. That's life.
Yeah. Man planning, God's laughs, right? Man planning, God laughs. So the questions I could throw back to you is, how have you lived your life differently? What have you done now that you've had that tragic situation happen? And then, unfortunately, as you said earlier, at 54, you had gaps in your financial plan. Your wife wasn't properly taken care of, and it took that incident and thankfully a recovery to say, oh, I better get my stuff in order, right? And unfortunately, that's the predominance of people in our country. Is it's not going to happen to me. I'm going to let it go. It's not that important. And then boom, it hits the fan.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, you know what? That guy next to you, he didn't wake up. And now his wife is screwed. His family is screwed. Okay. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have life insurance. He didn't have this. He didn't have that. And now she's going to have to lose the house, and the kids can't go to college, and she's going to be moving in with her mother. Yeah. Is that what he wanted on his deathbed? Is that what he was hoping was going to happen as his legacy? No. But so why aren't you addressing it? Why aren't you putting things in place? Well, this is the challenge in the industry, whether it's financial or insurance, is just people, I said it earlier, apathy comes from lack of education, lack of decision-making, the fear of appearing foolish. And then, it's an economic thing. I don't have the money. Oh yeah. Well, let's look at your budget. Where's your money going? I just had this conversation earlier. Like, how many people are my phone's on the floor, so it doesn't ring on us. How many people are getting a new phone every 2 to 3 years? Are you paying cash, or are they having on a payment plan? So Verizon and Apple and AT&T and T-Mobile, and everybody's leasing the phones now. And every 2 to 3 years, they want you to replace your phone. So I can't get away from my $120 a month Verizon bill. Yeah, it's unlimited this, unlimited that, but it's unlimited months of paying $120. And then as soon as I'm done paying off my phone, now you get a new phone. So I got 3 months of no payment, and all of a sudden I start a new payment. And then I said this earlier, is the car leasing trap. And people don't understand that. Like, okay, the leasing a car, back in the day, our parents, you bought a car, rarely did you have financing, and you kept that car till it drove in the ground and became a rust bucket, right? Well, in the 80s, leasing became a very viable option. People got to buy fancier cars for the same money, supposedly the same payment, because it was all about the payment. But they don't realize, like, they're now stuck on this wheelhouse of constant payment. You're indentured to the lease companies, because every 3 years you got to get a new car. So when you tell me you don't have money for your health insurance, your life insurance, your disability, and you got $1,000 lease payment, well, ergo, let's start right there. Go buy a used CPO, certified pre-owned Mercedes instead, and drive it for 10 years and have a fancy car, but not have $1,000 lease payment that you can't get out of, that you have to constantly, right? So you got to change your patterns. You got to change your habits. You always get what you always gotten if you always do what you always done. So if you can't cry, you can't afford it when you're spending money on things that are never going to stop being a payment. Yeah. What can you do differently? So go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Bruce, so many nuggets of wisdom here. And I wish we could go on longer, but we need to go ahead and wrap it up. This has been very fascinating. It's been educational for me. And how would people reach out to you? I hope people do reach out to you, because these are important discussions to be having.
So I have a podcast myself called Ask the Plan Man. It's available on YouTube at planman.tv. and all the audio stations, so Spotify and the like. And I talk about all things insurance, finance, and more. I take all my years of experience in the financial space, the insurance space, and we break down, no ads, no products. I'm not giving advice, I'm giving education. So just like we're talking in general terms here about long-term care and disability and health insurance and auto and home, there are episodes on there where I'll speak with a guest and we'll dive deeper into it and pretty much give people an explanation on things, and then hopefully give them enough that they can start to execute something for themselves, or they could seek more professional help, including us. So go to planman.tv. If you have direct questions, I'm happy to take phone calls and talk to anybody. It doesn't cost anything to talk with me. I'm always open and available. It's 844-PLAN-MAN. And then you could email me at Bruce@AskThePlanMan, AskThePlanMan.com. And then just hit me in comments, or like, I'm everywhere in social media. You can't, I got TikTok accounts. I got everything. So YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Bruce Weinstein, Bruce M. Weinstein, because there's a lot of Bruce Weinsteins out there. Bruce M. Weinstein. And then our company is Weinstein Wealth Insurance Solutions. So you could find us at pretty much anywhere. Go to Ask the Plan Man. That'll find direct to us.
Bruce, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.